Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're glad to have you here as the Personal Data Protection Office. How are we doing today morning? Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My audience that is here with me, I'd like to hear a good morning from you. Perfect. Our online audience, good morning. I hope you're doing well. Please do let us know where you are joining us from, and 1,000 apologies. We've started a bit late, but we thank you so much for your patience. Getting a bit of an echo. Let me just sort it that a minute. Okay, I think this is better. No, I'm still getting an echo. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us for the Data Privacy Day that is being celebrated by the Personal Data Protection Office in collaboration with Pulse Lab Kampala. We've been having a series of webinars to create awareness around data protection throughout the week. If you joined us throughout the week, then you will know that we had quite a number of sessions for you. So do let us know in the chat for our online audience what stood out for you from the various sessions that we had. Monday we had data privacy in Africa, and then Tuesday we had harnessing privacy preserving solutions for innovation in Uganda. And also with the Uganda Law Society, we had a webinar on how to comply with the Data Protection and Privacy Act. And then on Thursday, we had a webinar on the role of civil society in promoting privacy rights. And so today we have an e-conference, and we also have a very insightful and educative panel lined up for you, and of course with a number of other activities that I'll let you know as we go along the day. So do let us know where you're joining us from, and also do let us know what stood out for you throughout the week. If you joined us for all our webinars, for all our activities, we'll be delighted to hear from you. Today, before we start the program, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Angela Tugume. I am the Manager, Data Protection Affairs at the Personal Data Protection Office. And so allow me to give a few rules of engagement for our online audience. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section of the webinar, and then share your comments, your views, your ideas, your insights, your learnings in the chat with us. We'll be sharing them with the rest of the audience that is in the room. And then also this conference is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube and on our Twitter page. So do join us on the YouTube, live on YouTube. A link will be shared with you in the chat, and also do follow us on Twitter at PDPOUG, and we'll be delighted to have you there. Okay, so without further ado, I'll just tell us about the theme for today's conference, just a brief. And our theme for this year's conference, Data Privacy Day, is Your Privacy Matters. Your privacy matters as an individual, as a person, and would like you to know that it's a right that you are entitled to, and it should matter, and you should care about your privacy. And so along, we'll have a panel that will talk about your privacy rights in the digital age and why you should care about those privacy rights, and also how exactly do you exercise the privacy rights that you have. We, as the Personal Data Protection Office, are also using this day as an opportunity to highlight key issues on data protection and privacy, the role of our office, and the resources that we have developed for you as individuals, but also as businesses and government institutions, in order to foster awareness of privacy rights for the data subjects or individuals, and obligations and responsibilities for the businesses and government institutions that collect this personal data. And so we hope that as we do that, we shall empower you as individuals, and we also encourage businesses and organizations to respect privacy, safeguard data, and enable trust. So without further ado, allow me welcome our National Director for the Personal Data Protection Office, Ms. Stella Albertese, to give us opening remarks and also give us another brief as to why this day is important to us as a country, as a government, as a nation, and as Ugandans. Welcome with me, Ms. Stella Albertese. Stella, you're very welcome.
These days we all became medical personnel by association to these sanitizers. Good morning, everyone. And good morning to our participants online. Thank you very much for joining us today, which is the 28th of January 2022, when we celebrate the Data Privacy Day. It is not only Uganda that is celebrating this day, but it's celebrated around the world. So I'm happy that we are celebrating it with a law in place, with an office in place, with the National Director appointed and staff for the office. So you're warmly welcome. So dear participants, here and virtual, invited guests, our partners, the UN Global Pulse Lab and UNCDF, officials from the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance, members of the NITAU management, led by the Executive Director, Dr. Hatib Mugasa, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to this conference that is the climax of all the activities we have had in celebrating Data Privacy Week. A show of hands for those who have been attending our webinars. Very good, I'm happy that you're here. The international community uses this day to empower individuals and encourage businesses to respect privacy, safeguard data, and enable trust. For the Personal Data Protection Office, we saw the Data Privacy Day as an opportunity for us to highlight key issues on data protection and privacy, the role of the office, given that it is only a few months old, and the resources we have developed for individuals, businesses, and government institutions to foster awareness of privacy rights and obligations. The theme for this year's Data Privacy Week or Day is Your Privacy Matters. My privacy matters. Your child's privacy matters, your grandmother's privacy matters. The choice of this theme was deliberate because we believe individuals or data subjects are one of the best tools that we can use to ensure compliance. This is because it's their personal data. They are the ones who know who is asking for their information and who they interact with. Our view, therefore, was that if they are empowered, they will ask the right questions, they will share the gospel, if I may use that analogy from the Bible, and ultimately protect their right to privacy. All the above are critical to the delivery of our mandate as the National Personal Data Protection Office. This week has been quite engaging with the daily webinars that we have hosted. The topics too were designed to speak to our theme this year. We discussed privacy in Africa, the wins and challenges. We discussed privacy-preserving solutions for digital innovation in Uganda, not anywhere else, but in Uganda. We discussed the role of civil society in addressing privacy rights. And this morning, we shall discuss the right to privacy in the digital age. I want to thank our esteemed panelists. We already have my land friend, Mr. Robert Chirunda, and we also have Ms. Lillian Nalwoga, who, whenever you talk about things to do with the internet, if you don't invite her in the room, then you'll be missing a lot of information. So thank you very much for being here. The discussions have been engaging and insightful. We thank all our speakers for the excellent job they did, sharing of their time and sharing of their knowledge. From the President of the Network for Africa Data Protection Authorities to experts from Europe, US, Africa, and our own fellow Ugandans. Thank you very much. We hope that these discussions have created the awareness we need. On our part, we noted that the attendance was good and audiences were engaged. We encourage those who would like to know more about data protection and privacy, and most importantly, what their rights are, how they can enforce them, to follow us on the various online forums we are on, or call us, or email us, or visit us physically, since the country is now open. It is incumbent upon us, wherever we are, whatever position we sit, to know what our rights are, enforce them, and also share the knowledge we have gained. For those organizations collecting and processing personal data, it is expected that you will comply with the law. The benefits of complying with the law are many and include increased market return on investment, improved data management, boosted trust and credibility, enhanced data security, enhanced image and reputation, better understanding of collected data, and avoidance of potential fines and financial loss from data breaches. We are putting a particular focus on creating awareness on registration for a number of reasons. We believe when you register with the office, we are able to support you to comply. We are preparing a number of frameworks that will be able to disseminate through the data protection officers that you have designated. On top of that, we do a lot of information sharing through our monthly webinars, and of course through partners such as Unwanted Witness, who are here, who also help us to do training for some of our participants. The proper use of personal data can achieve remarkable things. It can improve, ease, and enrich our lives. So we encourage all organizations to make sure that when you collect this personal information, please use it ethically, please be transparent with the data subject, and when things go wrong, please make sure that you inform the office. At the office, we have purpose to provide as much information as possible to data controllers, processors, and data subjects. Make use of these resources to learn more and also evaluate whether your handling of personal information is appropriate. Further, we are also available through the Government Service Desk to respond to any inquiries on registration and other matters within the law. I want to thank NITA Uganda, which is the organization within which we operate, for their support. I want to thank the UN Global Pulse Lab, who have made this event possible by supporting us. And I want to thank all of you who are here. With those few remarks, I thank all the participants who have joined us today and who have been with us throughout the Data Privacy Week. As the office, we are committed to enforcing the law to the best of our abilities. With your support, we shall make great strides towards this goal and ensure that our privacy indeed matters. Thank you for the opportunity to address you this morning and for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Stella, for those opening remarks and also for giving us a very detailed brief of what transpired during the Data Privacy Week. And so I hope that each and every one of us that was part of that Data Privacy Week actually took a nugget or two and are, implementing it. For me, one of the things that actually stood out on our last webinar on the role of civil societies in promoting privacy rights was the fact that we must know who we are as a continent, as a country, and as a people. And of course, my own addition is you must know who you are as an individual, where you're going, your vision, your mandate. And so that will enable us have data protection and privacy that is actually workable in Africa, tailored for us to our solutions, to our needs, and it will be very beneficial for us as a continent. So, Stella, thank you very much once again. And now, ladies and gentlemen, allow me introduce our keynote speaker, the UN Resident Coordinator in Uganda, Ms. Suzanne Namondo. Ms. Suzanne of Cameroon commenced her tour of duty as UN Resident Coordinator in Uganda on 24th June 2021. As UN Resident Coordinator, she is the head of the United Nations system in Uganda, including the development and humanitarian response involving 29 UN entities and over 3,000 staff based at different stations all over the country. The United Nations Uganda Vision 2030 is a transformed, inclusive Ugandan society where people have improved quality of life and resilience for sustainable development. This vision is attained through implementation of the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, UNSDCDF 2021-2025, focusing on three strategic priorities: transformative and inclusive governance, shared prosperity in a healthy environment, human well-being, and resilience. Our keynote speaker today has over 25 years of experience in development work, including 19 years leading development professionals in the areas of policy formulation and program planning across 4 different United Nations agencies at the national, regional, and headquarters levels. Within the organization, she most recently served as the UN United Nations Resident Coordinator in Eritrea after occupying other senior positions with the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, including representative to Ghana and Comoros and deputy representative to Liberia. She also served the International Fund for Agriculture Development. Prior to joining the United Nations, Ms. Namondo worked with the International Plant Genetic Resources Institute, an international scientific organization, and global nonprofits, including Caritas Internationalis and Catholic Relief Services. She holds a bachelor's degree in political science and animal science from the University of Maryland, USA, as well as master's degrees in public administration from Columbia University, USA, and in animal health from the University of Reading in UK. Ms. Susan, we are more than delighted to have you join us today and give us the keynote speech. We couldn't have had a better keynote speaker than you. Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Thank you very much for that very generous introduction. Good morning to all. All the government officials here present today, civil society and private sector representatives, colleagues from the UN system, all ladies and gentlemen. I bring warm greetings from the United Nations family in Uganda. I'm really honored to be with you today to collectively acknowledge and discuss the important matter of data protection and privacy. On this day, the government of Uganda, the United Nations, and the rest of the world celebrate Data Privacy Day. It is an international effort to empower individuals and encourage businesses to respect privacy, safeguard our data, and enable trust. The commemoration is also an opportunity to highlight the progress that has been made while reflecting on the key issues on data protection and privacy, the role of the Personal Data Protection Office, and the various resources the office has developed for individuals, businesses, and government institutions to foster awareness of privacy rights and obligation. And the theme for today is Your Privacy Matters. From huge advances in predictive analytics in the healthcare sector to advances in autonomous vehicles that may, considering the progress elsewhere, who knows, in Uganda, might join our roadways soon, to advances in modern technology, all of these are powered by data. And so much of our daily lives become more and more digital. The data that drives these digital technologies becomes increasingly important. In this age of data revolution, each one of us contributes data in form of digital footprints, whether knowingly or unknowingly, as we go about our daily activities. When you make phone calls, when you pay your taxes on the URA e-tax portal, when you send mobile money, when you're searching on the internet, when you're registering for digital services, interacting with ATMs, etc., when you call to radio stations, you are contributing these digital footprints that accumulate over time. The volume of data created in Uganda will, of course, only increase as the government implements its plans towards digital transformation. And some of these plans include expanding mobile coverage and increasing internet connectivity. Increased digitization of our lives and the technological advances made to leverage the power of data do not come without risk, as I'm sure the conversation has been. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we preserve our right to data privacy. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Convention of Civil and Political Rights, and many other international and regional and national instruments recognize the right to privacy as a fundamental human right. That said, as I walked in, I said I've been in development now for many decades. Quite frankly, this is new. This aspect is new. As many as 3 decades ago, the Community of Nations recognized the importance of adopting data protection and data privacy requirements at national levels, as well as by international organizations with the adoption of the UN General Assembly guidelines for the regulation of computerized personal data files, in December 1990. More recently, in our common agenda published last year, the Secretary General called for reinforcing data privacy in the digital world as part of our shared values, and highlighted the importance of trust in securing a breakthrough scenario towards a better, more sustainable, peaceful future for our people and the planet. In today's digital world, perhaps more than ever, data privacy plays a critical role in building trust, including trust in the data economy and digital innovation. The message conveyed by our common agenda echoes the call made by the Secretary General in his roadmap for digital cooperation, published in June 2020. In this roadmap, the Secretary General also emphasizes on the importance of protecting the right to privacy in the digital space and called for effective personal data protection and the protection of the right to privacy in line with internationally agreed standards. In particular, to address the use of data by both the private sector entities and national governments, the Secretary General called for human rights-based domestic laws and practices for the protection of data privacy, including enforcement mechanisms such as access to judicial review or fully independent and well-resourced data protection authorities. Today, in this increasingly data-centric world, the state's protection of the right to privacy is increasingly crucial to all of us, to both enjoy and exercise our human rights, both online and offline. The data privacy developments that have taken place in Uganda over the last year or years align with those UN commitments on data privacy. The UN would like to congratulate the people and the government of the Republic of Uganda for establishing the Personal Data Protection Office as an independent office under the National Information Technology Authority and responsible for overseeing the implementation and enforcement of the Data Protection and Privacy Act number 9 of 2019. These are very significant milestones, especially towards providing an enabling environment for privacy, respectful and ethical data sharing for the social good, implementing the digital transformation program of NDP3, and realizing recommendations of the National Fourth Industrial Revolution Strategy. The establishment of the Personal Data Protection Office demonstrates a tangible commitment to protecting the privacy rights of Ugandans as the nation begins to seize the potential of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. I'm delighted to mention that the UN Global Pulse, through Pulse Lab Kampala, has been collaborating with the government of Uganda in exploring data protection and privacy-related strategies and frameworks. Their interventions will enable a safer and trustworthy use of data for the achievement of national development priorities. More specifically, Pulse Lab Kampala supported the formulation of the Data Protection and Privacy Bill 2014 by conveying the international best practices to the IC community of Parliament through benchmarking visits to other countries, hosting international dialogues, and contributing to the technical review of the bill. Expanding upon this collaboration, the Pulse Lab Kampala is now supporting the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance of Uganda to bring together experts working throughout Uganda's data ecosystem, the region, and around the world to supply key insights to inform the development of a national data market prototype and an ethical AI framework. The national data market prototype will include both a technical architecture to facilitate data sharing and a governance framework to ensure sharing is done in a privacy-preserving manner. The ethical AI framework consists of a compilation of analysis of key ethical principles applicable to the use of AI technology identified at the national, regional, and international level. As part of the key steps forward for Uganda outlined in this strategy, it is envisioned that this framework can then be used by public and private organizations and governing bodies to inform ethical AI governance strategies. As part of the development process of both critical deliverables, interviews of experts working throughout Uganda's data ecosystem, the region, and around the world have been conducted in combination with an expert consultation that was organized last year as part of this initiative to establish a community of practice around this issue and discuss policy and technological solutions to achieve this objective. I'm also very happy that United Nations Capital Development Fund is collaborating with the Personal Data Protection Office to develop a web-based solution that would allow individuals and organizations to register, report data security breaches, and enable individuals to lodge complaints through convenient channels. The UN in Uganda pledges continued cooperation and engagement around data privacy with the government of Uganda, and especially through the Personal Data Protection Office, to uphold to this theme. Going forward, the UN in Uganda has agreed on a joint program for data and statistics to enable us to better support the national data and statistical system. The joint program is an opportunity to help us further the principles of data privacy, build the necessary capacities at all levels of the data ecosystem, and explore the new and innovative approaches to data production, dissemination, and use. As I end, I wish to share two important reflections. I guess that's the theme that runs through such a day. Firstly, while we all acknowledge that digital technologies are a powerful tool for advancing human progress and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, it is critical to be mindful that they can also carry risks for peace, human rights, dignity of persons. Hence, we must create proper safeguards against these risks in accordance with the internationally agreed protocols. And two, the crises such as the 2008 global financial crisis and more recently the COVID-19 pandemic caught the world completely off guard. And decision makers worldwide continue to be challenged with the rapidly changing realities and predicting what the future holds. This creates a time lag based on the current systems that we have in place. It creates a time lag in terms of accessing actionable information, including on groups that are the most affected by these crises. These experiences call for the use of non-conventional data sources, for example, tapping into big data and citizen-generated data to complement conventional data sources so that we can use them more timely and be more efficient in the response that we have to these crises. So on those notes, I wish to conclude my remarks by thanking the Personal Data Protection Office, Pulse Lab Kampala, for organizing this event. It's very important. 30 years ago, quite frankly, we were not open to this. 20 years ago, most of us in this room were really not aware of this. Today, we all should be really concerned about this issue. Your privacy matters. I extend my appreciation to all the stakeholders who are here today to discuss this important subject. And going forward, I hope that the United Nations can be helpful to the government and people of Uganda in better responding to this issue. Thank you all very much for listening.
A very big thank you to our keynote speaker. Thank you so much for your kind remarks. And yes, we do agree. A few years ago, data privacy was not an issue. But today, in this digital era, it's a big concern, it's a big issue, it's a topic that we talk about every day. And so that leads us to our next panel, the right to privacy in the digital age. And so in this panel, we're going to look at why privacy matters to you as an individual. Why should you care? How does it affect you? And then the rights and how to enforce them. And so I'd encourage participants online, please do put your questions in the Q&A. And remember to put your comments, insights, and nuggets in the chat room. And so allow me introduce our moderator for this panel, Mr. Emmanuel Mugabi, who is cybersecurity and privacy expert. Emmanuel, you're very welcome. And as Emmanuel makes his way to the stage, I'll introduce the rest of the panel members. Our first panelist is Mr. Robert Chirunda. Robert Chirunda is a founding partner at Chirunda and Wasige Advocates, where he practices law with a current specific focus on the intersection between law and emerging technologies. He heads the firm's law, science, and technology practice. Robert also lectures law at the Makerere University School of Law, where he is also the convener of the Center for Law and Emerging Technologies. The center seeks to promote critical thought leadership on the legal questions relating to the responsible adoption of emerging technologies in Uganda and the wider African context. He is also a member of the National Task Force on the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is writing Uganda's national strategy for the responsible adoption of emerging technologies. He serves as the founding and current member of the Blockchain Association of Uganda. Robert, you're very welcome. Our next panelist is Mr. Alan Sempala Chigozi. Alan is a tech lawyer and the head of legal and programs at Unwanted Witness. His expertise spans data, compliance programs, and gap analysis. He has a notable track record in data protection, project management work, investigations, and data breaches. Alan, you're very welcome to today's panel. And our final panelist is Ms. Lilian Naroga, who is a technology researcher and advocate interested in promoting and advancing the appropriate use of ICT for empowerment and development. She has over 15 years in internet policy research and implementing ICT for D projects in Africa, with active involvement in internet governance debates at the local, regional, and global level through her role as the coordinator of the Uganda and East African Internet Governance Forums. Lilian is also a co-founder and board chair of the Internet Society of Uganda chapter. Lilian, you're very welcome to today's panel, and I do wish the panel a great discussion. Remember to put your questions in the Q&A and also your comments in the chat room. Thank you very much. Over to you, Emmanuel.
Thank you so much, Angela. My fellow panelists, you're welcome to the first panel of the day. Obviously, this week has all been about privacy. That's what we're talking about, given this today is internationally observed as the Privacy Day. And I'm honored to take you through this panel. So the background we have is that millions of people around the world are aware and uninformed about how their personal information is used, how it's collected or shared in a digital society. Therefore, this panel today is addressing in a language for a Muntu Wansi to understand. We've been listening into different pre-events and they've been focusing more on getting the information out a lot of interaction with regulators across Africa and the region. The good thing that I learned two things. Personal data here in Uganda will be understood the same in Kenya as well, and the terms are the same. Then I also noticed something, maybe for Stella and everyone. I noticed the ladies are in charge of privacy. I looked at all the regulators. I think on the call, all throughout the week, I think there were two gentlemen. Everyone else was a lady. So we need gender balance in the privacy space. So I'll come and bring it back down here with evolutions in technologies, especially after introduction of broadband, and especially mobile broadband. Consumers now can access different platforms and services across e-commerce, digital financial services. There's a lot of talk around taking the services to the edge, the unbanked. Chirunda, from your perspective, blockchain, there's things around decentralized finance, which are confusing regulators and so many people, social media, e-health, and education, amongst others. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. Before we start, just a question to the media in the room. Since today is Privacy Day, normally when I'm watching news, you find the media camera zooming in on someone's laptop or zooming in on someone's mobile phone. So for today, I urge the media in the room, let's observe Privacy Day since it's Privacy Day, and we also have a regulator in the office. And in today's paper, you saw in the monitor, the office will be starting enforcement for people who are not compliant. So for the media houses, let's observe people's privacy even as they are in the room today. So Lillian, from your perspective, in a simple way, what is privacy and how does it affect you as an individual that someone can relate to who doesn't know the act, who doesn't know all these terms that we've been talking about?
Thank you, Emmanuel. Good morning, everyone. All protocol observed, of course. It feels good to be here today, and if memory serves me right, I think this is the first grand event we've had to celebrate the Data Privacy Day in Uganda. I stand to be corrected, yes? And the very fact that it has happened just right after, the economy has been opened up, and we've been in the lockdown for the last 2 years, and we've been doing so much online. And today, as a nation, we come out to celebrate this very important day. I think we need to clap for ourselves and also applaud the Data Protection Office for doing such a great job in ensuring that, we put our privacy at the front. To me, it's a very interesting question because what does privacy mean to me is what I keep private is really a tricky question because privacy is my right to not be able to, if, for instance, I like telling a story. Just last month, I was conducting a training for university students on internet freedom rights and the like, and I asked one, what does privacy mean to you? Just by an example. And that response to data has sunk into my head because privacy to each and every one of us means something totally different. But to this particular individual, he shared and said, to me, privacy is someone not accessing my bedroom. And when you put it into that perspective, and this is now offline, all right? And when we come now in the digital age, because then I use that example to give this narration. What we do online and offline are more or less the same, but in most cases, we do forget ourselves when we get online. And as the Honorable, the resident representative said, the digital footprints we leave, online, we get too much excitement whenever we get online. And well, some of us here, maybe we are digital savvy, we have some bit of literacy in, using digital platforms, but when we are looking at the unconnected, when we are getting people to connect, and the first thing they're accessing, they're doing on the internet, online, is to go to social media. There's that lot of, digital footprints that they are leaving that gets known to be erased. Much as there are several rights that, you can demand for your data to be, forgotten. You can write, right now with the data protection law and the data protection office, I think these are some of the things that are going to be addressed. How much data is being collected. So in a nutshell, for me, privacy means to me is what I've not shared should not be made public. And that is public, but if it be between two individuals, if I share with you something in secret, it's supposed to be a secret, and secrecy and privacy, I think they go hand in hand. So in that regard, Emmanuel, I would say that to me, privacy is that boundary I set around myself that I don't want anyone else to get access to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lillian. Coming on to Alan Sempala. I've been around this privacy space for quite some time, right from when Uganda was drafting the bill. Then we went, and at that time we spoke to some people and said, there's privacy, but even before the bill comes, why don't you start putting your house in order? And someone said, oh, it's just a bill. It's not going to move. So if the bill moves, it becomes an act. And we speak to people, well, it's no longer a bill, it's now an act. Are you ready to comply? It's like, that's Parliament, has it been gazetted? Then it gets gazetted. I said, are you going to comply? But like, oh, their regulations are not around, So we're going to hang on a little bit. Regulations come out, a person says, okay, there's no office in place. So we know about it, but we don't see the regulations. Regulations are out, but we don't see the office in place. So the office is established, director recruited, an announcement is made. Are you going to start? They're like, okay, we're going to wait and see. So compliance is done. But then today I saw your T-shirt, and I like your T-shirts. I don't know if I can get one. Yes, to compliance. And so right about that time, Unwanted Witness came out with a report that really brought privacy in a way that someone could easily understand. That was in the Safe Border privacy report that we did, and eventually the scorecard. But from the Safe Border, that's when most people actually started paying attention to the terms and conditions for the apps they're using, and also seeing how their data is being used from them as a consumer. And my boss normally tells us that we are not consumers, we're actually products in the digital space. So consumers go to see that the other label they have is we are actually data points when it comes to different ways that technology is used. So from your perspective, to communicate in a way that someone online can easily understand, why should I care about privacy? Why should any person, any Montrealans, anyone care about privacy?
Thank you very much. Just to add a bit on the definition of privacy from Lillian, privacy essentially means your personal space. Like she noted, we all have that appreciation of that personal space, and I think that's why we have gated houses. Even when we are looking for houses to rent, you are looking for a home that has a fence. And being African, we even choose who stops at the gate, which visitor stops at the gate. We have those visitors who you ask, who are you, what do you want? Thank you very much. Then there are those who even come into the confines of the compound. You see, it's the privacy is essentially the choice and the power to choose who you want to associate with. How you want the world to know you. You get it? Because if you don't have that power, then a lot is at stake. Privacy is an enabler of many rights. You can't enjoy any other right. I can't think of any other right that you can essentially enjoy without the right to privacy. Be it voting, the right to express yourself, the right to associate. You can't enjoy those rights if the right to privacy is not respected. So therefore, for anyone, and like it has been said, with the advent of the digital era, a lot of excitement came through the convenience of ordering food online, the convenience of getting transport from where you are, they can find you, the convenience of buying, the convenience of making life so easy. But again, that brought in a lot of excitement from us, so we've left a lot of footprints on social media. We've put a lot of our personal information out there, but of course it has a cost. Now, if your privacy is infringed or not respected, that means things like your reputation is at stake. We all have, we say, skeletons in the closet, and the moment it comes out, your reputation is not the same. There is a certain prominent politician and fairly a good pastor, Pira. This gentleman, he impressed a lot of Ugandans with his command of English, his business acumen, until we learned that he takes naive people process by process. Now people are thinking, wait a minute, now you speak all that English, yet you take people process by process. So we no longer look at him the same way. You see how your reputation can be affected if your personal information is released out there. Personal information can even be your opinion. Once upon a time, there used to be a politician, Kampala politician called Sulaiman Chidandala. Until an audio of him with the former IGP came out, Chidandala doesn't command any political clout anymore. He's no longer the same. He was looked at as the next Kampala MP, Central MP. After that audio came out, where is Chidandala? He's still struggling. So whenever your opinion that you put online, we've been on social media, rather WhatsApp pages, groups, and we've given our opinion. Before you know it, the audio is moving around. And the moment it is not proper, sometimes people start thinking otherwise of you. You get my point? So your reputation is at stake if your privacy is not protected, if you're not so careful with how you leave your footprints, how you leave things about you. Secondly, your security as a person. We live in a world where we are surveilled, we are monitored. So you register for a SIM card, you register for a national ID, and of course we give it out in good faith, knowing that whoever we're giving out is going to protect it. You get it? No one has the desire to live in a world where you are monitored, where you're not free. We all want to we want to live in that controlled environment. So if the person who is collecting that information doesn't protect it, doesn't give the necessary security around it, your life may be at stake. And the reason why you find people being hacked on the gate. How did they get your location? How did they get where you live? No one knows. In the previous election, we got a confession from a certain politician, the Honorable Semujunganda. He told us a couple of people are approaching him and his other colleagues, selling them information that actually NIRA collected. You get it? It's not NIRA selling it, but certain people. How those people got that information? Because if you're vying for any constituency, people call you and tell you, we can give you phone contacts of all your constituents. How they get that, no one knows. You get my point? So basically, that's what privacy means. And if it's compromised, if it's not respected, if it's not, the data collectors have not taken measures to comply, because that's what happens. Lastly, even in relationships, those of you who have related before will attest that the level of intimacy in any relationship depends on the level of personal information the parties know about each other. Huh? The moment one party knows more than they thought wasn't the case, the level of intimacy goes down. Then we hear divorces, then we hear companies separating and ceasing to happen. So privacy goes down to who we are, because it's our dignity. It's who we are. It's our worth. It's all we have. If you are not so careful, part of you is used as a commodity. Briefly, last year we released a report, and it's called the Privacy Scorecard Report. This is a compliance report. We essentially assessed the biggest data collectors in Uganda, but we also assessed the most used apps in Uganda. Interestingly, some of the most used apps in Uganda have trackers. They have permissions. Yeah? The call app. The call app, some of you have it. That app collects information, a lot of information from your phone. It doesn't only stop on your information, it also collects information of your relatives. Say your mother, without them knowing. It goes on to confirm whether the information in your phone is actually true. In their privacy policy, they state that please inform your relatives of your friends that we will collect their information. So they are putting the onus on you to inform your mother that they are going to collect and how many of you who have the call app actually inform their mothers and fathers that they are collecting their information? You see, the King James Bible app. King James Bible app. It's a Bible app. It's a Christian app. Why would it have trackers? It has 15 trackers, 33 permissions that are sought to access your information. So as you're typing amen, as you're being spiritual, getting closer to God, someone is getting closer to your life. They are selling your information. They are making it a commodity, like he said. You see, there is another transport app. He has just mentioned it. But that transport app, from that report, they have since made remedy of their issues. And I want to state that Safe Border, I've stated it before, they have one of the best privacy policies in Uganda, followed by NSSF. But it was after that concerted effort from CSOs to let them know, guys, it's not personal. Because before, like you mentioned earlier, we used to tell people to comply, and they would tell us, what are you talking about? We don't have a law. Then the law came, like you mentioned, we have no regulations, we have no office. You get it? So, and I must commend Safe Border, because after the intervention of then NITA, now the Personal Data Protection Office, they are amended. They have a good privacy. It's robust. They have a few issues to sort out, but again, that's a good thing. So I urge all data collectors, there is that report. It's on our website from NITA. Please read it up. You might want to pick out some few things in regards to compliance. So essentially, that is it.
Thank you so much, Alan. What I get from what you're saying, choice and power. Those are the two things I get. So as an individual, I should have the choice and power over my personal data, and that privacy is an enabler for many other rights. Moving on to Robert, from the cases that Alan is talking about, and some of that insight by Lillian, and also a few scenarios that I saw. Today's paper has a story about a lawyer, I think it's a Monitor, who was, okay, the legal words are going to confuse me, but I know he was fined 300 million shillings for going against a judge. And then actually in one of his tweets, he actually put in the photo of the judge and put in so many things. So he has personal data, which I thought was missing in the case, but maybe they can edit that and include that there so that it's a learning for other people. But then, and I've also seen another, I was speaking to someone else the other day, and they told me of a story that they applied for a job at a certain organization, and then after a while, by coincidence, he was buying a Rolex, and his CV was there, built by the Rolex guy. Names, everything, right there. So that is personal data on a paper record. Then my other personal story that I told last time is I went to a pharmacy, and when I was going to pay by card, apart from swiping the card, the lady was recording the information at the front. So my name's then at the back recording the information. So I asked her, why do you need all this information? I'm buying medicine. I'm going to pay using cards, and that service is provided by whoever is giving you the POS. So all you have to do is insert it, a PIN. Why do you need information of my card? Because that is beyond the processing. So she said, you're talking a lot. She called the manager. I explained to the manager, and they said, okay, we're going to take care of it. Next time I went, they changed. This time they were not doing that. But that was me because I knew my rights and I had a voice to speak. So from your perspective, how can people enforce their rights? How can, because someone may not know that the regulator exists, or they may not know that they have a voice to speak for themselves, or some people, like the case you talked about, some of the people were affected by that, were part of the people that went to civil society and said, this is happening to me, how can you help me? So from your perspective as a lawyer and someone who understands technology and law, well, how can Mutawans exercise their rights and have them enforced as provided for the Data Protection Act?
Well, thank you very much for such a wonderful question, Emma. But if you don't mind, and first of all, I just want to say how grateful I am for the opportunity to be here and for NITA Uganda to host us to this event. I took very keen interest in the remarks of the keynote speaker because it is always gratifying to know that some of the work that we're doing is leading somewhere. When I hear the national strategy on 4IR mentioned, it's deeply gratifying. But if you don't mind, I'd just like to sort of take a step back, then I'll come back to what we can do about this. To start on the question of why should I care? And I want to add to what my colleagues have said, maybe a few points in just a minute. I'd like to suggest 5 reasons why Omuntu Wawansi must care about data. First of all, if you look at the wording of all data legislation, if you look at the Constitution, when it talks about privacy, it is talking about my privacy. In other words, there's a proprietary element to privacy. It's not just that it's your space. It is the space. It's not your space because you occupy it. It's your space because you own it. And so for someone else to commoditize that is to commoditize you. There is this notion that privacy is about what others do to me. And I'd like to hopefully suggest to you that privacy is more than that. Infringement on privacy is a lot more than that. And so the first is to think about the next time you say my privacy, remember that by adding the article my before the word privacy, you have taken it from just a space that you walk in and out of to a space that you own. So there's a proprietary element to privacy. The second is that personal identification, and this is the point that I believe you were making with the card, and was it you who mentioned the obligation to inform your mother? What's happening is that this data that's being collected digitally is creating an intersection between the digital world and the physical world. In other words, someone who simply says, my father doesn't know how to use a smartphone as much as my youngest sister does, or as much as my 6-year-old son does. That's just a generational thing. He was born before computers and stuff like that. But what's happened is that because of the apps and the tools and the collection that's happening, you now have a fusion. Staying offline is no longer enough as a measure of privacy protection. So you have this fusion, and one must care because practically speaking, data collection and data manipulation is giving access to spaces not just that you own, but also those of your loved ones. The best example, and probably the most scandalous that the world has seen, in my view, is Cambridge Analytica, which we know from the US election where 14 million people's profiles were used to impact 88 million voters in the US, and that swung the election. Now listen to this. The election was swung by I think a 3 or 4% margin in the vote. You would imagine that that's a very small margin, but that's determining the most powerful president in the world. It came via what I like to simplify by calling a gossip platform that was called Facebook, via a third-party user, and that's how complex it can be, because you see, when US policy is determined in 4 years by someone, what it did is it dismantled democracy, because now you could no longer say the Americans actually voted their president. Was it the person they really wanted to vote or the person they were influenced to vote? But I get ahead of myself. The third reason is that in the end, really, what's happening is that data collection is not just affecting you, it's affecting products, it's affecting choices. This is a story of online marketing. This is a story of why every time you go to Jumia or you watch YouTube, it sends you Jumia, as adverts are not maybe some store in the UK or something like that. Your choices are being influenced by the footprint that you leave behind, which takes me to my fourth point, which is that your story, my story, is written once, and I am writing it as I go along. It can be modified, it can be improved, but the sum total of my story, which is who I really am, and in legal terms, my brother Alan, my sister, the director, would agree that in legal terms, that's really is what we call individual autonomy. That is the foundation of all rights. Your individual autonomy, who you are, is written once. So when someone takes that, and what makes it valuable is that it has to be identified to you. Because the things that I do, Alan and I may be lawyers, but maybe I am just too loud. And the reason why people prefer him to me is that he is gentle, he takes things easy. So they will go to him because, tapapa. And that's the unique identifier. What makes the data valuable is because they want to know, I'm looking for a lawyer who is calm, who is this and who is that, and who moves in the following spaces. That is influence. Now, when we take away from the fact that, when we trivialize what that really means, we then take data too lightly or more lightly than we should. And the fifth reason is that in the end, all of this impacts on human behavior. Not just at the individual level, but the society level. You see, when people talk about data privacy, they focus on the extraction imperative. There's really two imperatives. The extraction imperative is where the collection is happening. So I pick up my phone, I place an order at Java's. And the lady picks up and says, "Good afternoon, Mr. Chirunda." And I say, "You have my number?" And she says, "Yes, we do." Why? Because we stored it. Okay, I'd like to send a dish, I'd like to send a meal to my sister who works at Foreign Affairs. "Oh, you mean so and so. Which address should we use?" The problem with that is that now they are collecting a pattern about my sister through me because they're saying, "Where is she today?" She has no idea this is happening. Is that fair? In the end, when they pull all of that together and use it to influence what dishes they prepare, what fruits they sell, you can see how eventually you go into, that's the extraction imperative. But beyond that, beyond the collection, you then have the fusion of the physical world and the digital world. You have your daily life because now they know what you order. And that will, by the way, that will happen at Java's, it will happen at Asian Fusion, it will happen at most of these restaurants, which is why I personally really only order online if I must. That's just a personal preference. Because I don't like mapping my circles because I want to do something nice for someone. But beyond that collection, you then have the impact on the physical world, your daily life. The third level is your body and yourself, and the fourth level is going to be modified behavior. In the end, when people view YouTube videos, what they don't realize is that what YouTube is looking for, because take an example of YouTube. How does YouTube actually collect data? It's the clicks and the eyeballs they get. What that means is that they then start to influence what you watch, what you view, what you search, and what they're really doing is going to the heart of human behavior. That is, for me, where the current discourse on data needs to go, and that takes us from the extraction imperative to the predictive imperative. By being able to influence the way that you behave, they're then able to predict what you will do next, and therefore influence how society really, really runs and really works. That will go into elections, into governance, into food, into politics, into every sphere of society. When you think about Facebook only as a gossip platform, you miss the point. Because really what's happening is they're influencing what you do. One last example on that, I was fascinated to watch the way that 5 companies versus Trump really swung American elections. You see, in 2016, we talked about Cambridge Analytica. In 2020, I hope you followed the Twitter fight with Trump, because that tells you just how much power. Now, why would we care? Because US foreign policy affects us. That's why. And you see, when Twitter says we're going to block these accounts in Uganda, that impacts how government determines policy in Uganda. And if government shuts down Facebook, I was talking to Ron Kawamara, I'm sure he won't mind me saying this because we're in a public space, and he said, look, when you shut down Facebook, you impact my business. I think Facebook made $9 million in Uganda last year, Jumia paid $3 million. The thing about that $3 million is that it affects the small businesses that are marketing on Facebook. So you can't ignore this stuff anymore. You can't just say it's Twitter, it's for the elite, it's a bubble. No, because what's happening there is influencing who's being able to deliver food to your house. And ultimately, it will influence behavior. What should we do about it? The first thing, of course, I suggest is that we all cooperate with the Data Protection and Privacy Office as much as we can. We raise awareness as much as we can. I salute Unwanted Witness and the other CSOs that are doing a lot of work there. There's a lot of work to do. I personally am committed to working with the people in the legal space and having conversations about, because you'd be shocked. So much happens in the courts. And once your document goes to a court, it is a public record. I was involved in a divorce case. And I'll keep the story really short. What was happening is that these guys had agreed, the husband and wife, now ex-husband and ex-wife, had agreed on everything except where should the last born go to school. The mother preferred a different school, the father preferred a different school. As the argument ensued, I said, look, we're at an impasse. I told the judge, can we just bring the boy, he is, 9 years old? Surely he can tell us which school he prefers. And the judge said, I will never do that. I won't let you do it. I will not do it because that boy will hate you, me, and their parents. You have a judge like that who says, I will not scar a child for life. But then you have people who carelessly take videos. I have never, and I don't know why people do it, maybe because I'm in a public space, I can finally voice my resentment for this. But if you go to an accident scene, and the first thing on your mind is to take pictures of the dead or the injured, I seriously think that you need help. And that's just my view, and I'm sorry to use this platform to say that, but let's just remember that every time you create a digital record, that record is permanent. So this takes me to beyond cooperating with the PDPO. We as individuals must mind our behavior, because that behavior feeds into what one author has called behavioral surplus. It feeds into this insatiable appetite for data that these machines are mining and throwing at us and repurposing for very different uses. It starts with you. I once had this paranoia that maybe I needed to mind my security a little more, so I sat down with a friend of mine whom Emma knows well, Noah Balesambu, and I said to him, no, I'm concerned about my security. And he said, Robert, 70% of security is behavioral. A few nights ago, I'm getting ready to go to bed, and I have to just check one last website. And my iPhone says, your phone has stopped 176 attempts to track you. I thought, okay. Now, because I am a lawyer, every time I go to a page and they say, cookie policy, if you deny me content, I will go off. Because I just don't click for the sake of it. If I am going to accept a cookie policy, it is because I am desperate for that content and I can't find it anywhere else. So we must cooperate with the PDPO. We must understand what's happening, why data is important, why it hurts us, why we must care. And we must, as much as possible, tell the person next to us. In my office, for instance, everyone knows that when we handle information, we handle it as sensitively as possible. Why? Because I happen to think that if you want to fix a democracy, if you want to fix government, fix the family. I believe that 90% of Uganda's problems are parenting issues. My son knows which channels not to watch. My son knows the things that he will not do with the phone. That generation is going to live in a worse time than us. Because, and I always get a kick in saying this, in 2008, which is what, almost 14 years ago, by May 2008, you remember where you were, but there was no smartphone anywhere in the world. The most advanced the world had gone was a PDA or a BlackBerry phone. When you look back, you realize, hang on a second, these things that we take for granted, most of us here have at least 2 phones. Maybe you leave it at home, maybe you give it to your kids, maybe you give it to your driver, but even your security guard at home has a smartphone. That's how fast the world changes. The smartphone you carry has more computing power than a Boeing 737. Amazing, isn't it? When you think about what can happen on that phone, if you don't mind what you're using it for, that's where you start. So I'd suggest that at the individual level, how much do you know? How much do you read? Because we can blame the big five or the big giants, what I call GAFA government, Google, Apple, Amazon, Alibaba, and Facebook. We can blame them all we want. But really, if you don't mind what data you give them, why would you blame them? The third thing I would suggest, of course, is that we have to start rethinking the new dimensions and the new frontiers. And this takes me to the realm of policy. As we are writing these policies, and that is why the wording of the national strategy is careful enough to provide for responsible adoption. It is not enough for us to think about the promise of 4IR and what we can do with it. I believe, for instance, and I've said this to people at the National Planning Authority, that data can play such a vital and critical role in not only solving public problems, and we've done a report about this as the Center for Learning Emerging Tech, what opportunity lies in delivering services to government service delivery to the people. But that means that we must be careful how we do it. If you think about the most recent example, during COVID, the contrast between distributing posho and beans in Kawempe using soldiers and using MTN and Airtel to send 500,000. One is easier to audit, it is more efficient, it is quicker, has fewer boots on the ground, and in theory should maybe even be cheaper. But there are data issues there. Are you empowering the telecom to start profiling more than they need to? We know they profile, but are we looking into how they profile? Because they're saying, wait a minute, if government is doing it, and thank God we finally have a PDPO that's operational, I'm sure these thoughts are on your minds. But we see the promise, but we must adopt and we must write our policies thinking not just about, as our keynote speaker said, the fact that when the rules were first written, the world wasn't this advanced. I am one of those who argue that we need a new legal design for the fourth industrial revolution. Why? I'll just give you one reason, because the old design was written with the state as a guarantor of rights. The companies we're talking about now, some of them are more powerful and richer than certain governments. How will you hold them accountable? We then need to start talking about rolling back and things like a universal basic income, but that's in the policy realm. Just to wrap it up, I think that we need interventions at the policy level, at the individual level, and we must cooperate with the PDPO. I remember talking to Mr. Vincent Bajira, who was PS, Minister of ICT, when the law passed. And I said, Vincent, do you see the need to go beyond? He said, Robert, I hear you. We had to start somewhere. Truer words have never been spoken. And I think that as a Ugandan, I say it beyond Uganda, that I'm really proud of where we are, the rules that we have. At least we are starting somewhere. I will just leave it at that for now and hope that I've said something useful.
Thank you so much, Robert, for that very good response. I've gotten, sure like everyone else, they have properly gotten the message across. Most importantly, it starts with us, ourselves, to know we have a right and exercise that. And also, I recently were saying staying offline is no longer enough. My friends think I'm very, not paranoid, okay, very observant. They think apps I will never use on my phone or things like that. But then I came to realize why I agree with your statement that staying offline is not enough. It doesn't matter. Like he said, I can do my part. There are some apps I'll never use because I'm a bit cautious on platforms. But my colleague will give my information away because they chose to not take care. So staying offline is no longer enough. And also how choices are being used. We're being influenced by the choices we make. It just brought to mind one story of a supermarket in the US called Target, how they are profiling data for how people purchase. So they run their data and they noticed that if a lady is buying so many scented things, all of a sudden she changes and now buying unscented lotions, buying zinc, magnesium, that she must be expecting. So they decided to design a product that would look at this data. If that data matches correct, then they're going to send coupons for diapers and so many other things. So this particular customer they noticed the trend, so they sent to the house a coupon for pregnancy things, preparing and all that. So next day the father goes to the supermarket, angry, demands to talk to the manager saying, why are you sending me things to do pregnancy to my house? So the manager says, oh, I apologize for it and all that stuff, goes back. Next day, the guy called back, said, oh, sorry, it seems I have some issues in my house. And my daughter is expecting and all that. So he got to know better, supermarket got to know before him, and information went out like that. So the data points that we have are actually being used to influence the decisions that we take. But also I like that you noted that data can be used for social good, and also drawing from the speech from the keynote speaker, and also from the remarks from the Personal Data Protection Director earlier on, data can be used for good, and which both speakers actually called for responsible use for data sharing, data economy that will allow that to happen, which are very good notes. So just to wrap it up, from Lillian, I know you're running a public school of governance, internet governance. From that perspective, what messages are you going to be driving across for this year, given that it's January and most people make New Year resolutions, company strategies, for privacy and making the message across? How is that playing into the School of Public Governance?
Thank you, Emmanuel. Just last year, we started the first school on internet governance in Uganda. And part of this is to introduce individuals, from the broad internet stakeholder group, whether it's government, the state actors, whether it's students, academia, whether it's media or civil society, into this space. And at times when we talk about internet governance, to many people, when you go back to the definitions, they look at just that word governance, and it becomes such a broad term that people do not see why they need to understand or to be involved, how to know how the internet works. And we are here today because of the internet, I'm sure before COVID, this room would have perhaps 500 guests or more. But we've learned to appreciate the benefits of what the internet gives us. And not just in Uganda, we are at a digital transformation journey. Of course, like my friend here, Roberta, said, we have to start somewhere, We started somewhere and we are here. Many years, I can say 5 years ago, when we were having these debates of who runs the internet, how should it be governed, who should be involved, how do these policies come up? We've had conversations of policy frameworks and, regulations coming into place, and I'm happy to see that we have moved. We have the policies in place. We have the regulations in place. Data protection was just one of those, policies that we kept crying for, and it is there. And actually, it is one of those policies that have moved at a very fast rate. You know why? Because privacy matters. Just like my panelists have said, and just as you've emphasized, it does matter what you leave, what you put, whether online or offline, okay? And when you look into that aspect, if we are bringing more people to appreciate the use of technology, if you're trying to simplify life, you're trying to make things digital, get more people to use online banking, get more people, to understand these integrations, mobile money, online banking, now agent banking, everything is simple. When you go that right now, I can just sit here and I'm like, oh yeah, I need to run downtown. I'll just place, at the tip of my hand, I'll just place on the SafeBorder app, and my SafeBorder will be waiting for me just, out of the gate there. We are pushing for people to use technology, but that push, what happens? So what if you push? What happens when people get online? And I'm happy to see that such spaces, like I said, it's quite amazing that the data protection and privacy law has moved really fast. The regulations were just up, in a year. The office is there. We want to see how is it implementing. Okay, I'm sure there's a time I think we celebrated, was it 100 days? Yes, 100 days. So beyond that, we need to see real accountability, and I'm happy to see my colleagues at Unwanted Witness having this privacy scorecard. So when we talk about, say, this is just a small aspect of the internet, privacy, but it is key. It does matter, because without privacy, you cannot have trust in how the internet works. We've had the cases of Cambridge Analytica, how data is being used to manipulate your behavior, to vote who you want. And usually I see a meme going around, what people don't know, privacy matters, what people don't know, they cannot spoil. It speaks volumes. So if we are going to really get people to appreciate, we still have a long way to go. We need to develop and, bring that trust that, yes, you need to come and connect, but there are these measures, there are these aspects that are there. And the school is more of a capacity building kind of, knowledge building, knowledge capacity for people to be able to understand, to get involved. It starts with me, it starts with you. It's not the responsibility of just, the state, but also the private sector. We as individuals, I think Sempala here mentioned something about spouses, getting to know privacy, what Many times we've seen marriages break because of trust, privacy. So we as individuals, we are also violators of, of this fundamental right. We shouldn't just be looking at companies, yes, they profit more, but also we as individuals, we can become violators. Many people, I think the other thing, I don't know if you're tracking these, there are these apps, I usually get notifications that you can put in, track your, your spouse, actually it's always about spouse, like, you can install, notify them, send them a notification, like it allows you to send them, once they accept, then you can be able to, know their whereabouts and all that. Some apps maybe don't even offer that. So you see, there's the issue of trust, okay? If I'm to go to a place like, I don't want to use Nakapiripiriti, but it's what has come to mind. We know there are still, connection issues, okay? Yes, then you find maybe Airtel has put their fiber. There is a school, there's a community center, and, maybe at the local government, there's internet. Then you're going to find someone else may want to come and boost that internet. And just because people are excited, to connect, they'll go and tap into that, all right? But if the first experience they get is fraud, they'll be able to tell their grandsons or daughters or neighbors like, internet tekola, this doesn't work. At the end of it all, for us who are in this space, you, I, and everyone here, who are trying to push to some is make an income, for those who are into, the commercialization or, digitalization for income. But for all of us who are into this, there's some aspect we are getting out of it. It befits our purpose. So the issue of digital trust, knowledge building, capacity building, to people to understand the importance of these many, many different, issues does matter, and privacy is at the top of it all. We may push for digital, connections, talk about data costs and all that, but once this privacy issue is not properly addressed, we will not be able to get the many millions who are pushing to use these applications. So, in a nutshell, what we are trying to do is build the capacity of individuals, ensure that policies are there, but also to make sure that we as a country are able to participate in these kind of, international platforms. regional, at the continental level, there are conversations happening. And the internet is not just, here in Uganda, we are global. Right now, we were celebrating, I think on Monday, the webinar had the entire, different data protection offices in Africa. So if we are looking at policy level, then how do we ensure that our policies are speaking to each other? How do we ensure that if someone committed a crime, in Nairobi, stole my money digitally here in Uganda, I can be able to track them, I can be able to have a case and someone is able to rectify that. So we want to have this kind of conversations, people to understand, get to the core meeting, meaning that these issues we cannot just say it's just state or non-state actors, the private sector, but also us as individuals, we are able to push to see that the internet is for everyone and it works for us all in the way that we should be able to benefit and appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leah. That's quite a load for the year from the School of Internet Governance. We look forward to listening more on that. Moving on to Alan Sempala. You unleashed the privacy scorecard, and that has had some movement in the market. So from the perspective of today's panel, do you have plans for getting this message across outside the urban circles that we have down to the lower districts? How is that going? And also on the other side of enforcing compliance, I've noted that you are pushing out trainings for data protection officers, which is commendable, because I've seen most people sit back knowing that once they register with the office, that's their first tick box. Second tick box, they have appointed the DPO, and then they sit back and they say, we have complied with the law. And that's like only 1%. So on those two perspectives, the one, getting the message across down towards different languages, and also on the other side of empowering more capacity building for people to know what it actually means to say yes to compliance. So quickly, if you can tell us what your perspective is.
Now, in that scorecard report, the scorecard put compliance at 35%. That is very low. So in that case, we launched this campaign, Say Yes to Compliance, and we're encouraging all data collectors to comply. Now, compliance, people think it's only registering with the DPO office. Doesn't stop there. After registering, what are you doing when you go back home? You see, compliance is akin to insurance. When you insure your car, say comprehensive insurance, they urge you not to drink and drive. Don't put bottles in the car while driving, yeah? And you can do that. You can do that and nothing happens. I mean, you can do that over and over. But the day you get an accident and they find a bottle in your car, you won't get compensation. So is compliance to data protection. So you can register with the DPO office, that's good, but when you go back, what are you doing? Are you practicing what you preach? Are you walking the talk? Are you giving people their rights to access that information you have about them? Are you informing them of what information you are collecting? From the report, we realize that many people are collecting more than they need. They tell you one thing and they do the other. They will tell you collect your name and phone number and that is it, but they collect more than that. They even collect your location and you don't know that. So are you telling the truth? Are you giving all the information that you collect? So we encourage people to comply. That is one. But also, we would want to encourage the government of Uganda. I think the establishment of the office and the laws, that's a good step forward, okay? But the office needs support. It needs resources. You see, data mining is a big-time business. These guys have money. They're equipped, they're resourced. They can invest in all kinds of technology to mine data. They can take the chance to manipulate the loopholes in our laws. But if we have an office that is not resourced, we thank the government for this establishment, that is good, but we request for more budget allocations to this office. Let them be given more resources to investigate, so that they are not more of a reactive office, but a proactive office to investigate manipulations. Because these guys are wise, they can do all forms, they can disguise the manipulation. So that is good. And definitely we encourage civil society organization. And we are alive to the fact that there will never be enough resources. Even when we implore government to put in more money, more resources, there will never be enough resources. So in this case, civil society organizations should always come and support the office, do more trainings, okay? We are doing more trainings next month, data protection trainings. Actually, it's a mandate. After appointing a DPO office, you don't stop at that. You're mandated to train them on data protection. So we encourage other civil society organizations to make more awareness. Empower people, empower those who collect, support the office. They need our support. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alan. Moving on to Robert. Given what he told us about, and from the keynote speaker, she said 20 years ago, I was trying to imagine where I was, and I was far away. But again, 20 years ahead, people talking about the metaverse. People talking about things like the metaverse, blockchain. They were getting more and more connected, which is going to get scary for as we move. And given what you mentioned about how we can get the laws to catch up and everything geared around the person, me, as my right to privacy, as provided for in the Constitution, how best would you advise organizations to cope in such an environment where they need to do the data mining, they need the AIs, they need to use all this information, but at the same time also make sure that they are preserving the right to privacy for me and everyone else?
Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Emma, for that really interesting question. I think and I'm not sure how much time we have. I know we have spent quite a bit. So I'm just going to summarize it to what I think the biggest discourse globally today is, which is privacy by design. That's where every organization needs to focus. That we need to awaken that social conscience of organizations to build technologies, to use data, to reach people in a way that is honest and socially conscious to privacy. And the core principles are well known. The 7 core principles that are driving privacy by design are well known. The literature is out there. In the US, I think the biggest discourse now is on Scrims versus Facebook. And Scrims too has really opened the discourse on how far should companies go, what expectations should they have. Because the PDPO might come and put their foot down, and then you will scream, but I have a right to do business. But in the end, what you are doing to people, if you think about the invasions Alan mentioned in the data, when someone turns that against you, so I'm a social commentator, and people ask me, why do you care? And I tell them, because I was born in exile. So I know the price that my parents paid to leave Uganda for 8 years. For that reason, I don't wish it on anyone's child to be in exile. Now, if you run a business and you are collecting data, start there. Is it fair for you to say, I will collect data because it works for me? That will then lead us to, okay, as we write strategies for data markets and things like that, how are we going to handle data brokers? How are we going to handle the other players that are coming into the market? What do we need to do about the big companies and the multinational players? Those are conversations that we need to start having. I do realize that maybe I'm putting the cart before the horse. We have to first maximize where we are. And so for me, building the synergies on how we can write the privacy into the technologies is the starting point on that. The second is making sure that if we are going to go into behavioral surplus and influencing behavior, or if we know that this is happening, then we must do something about it. And there are proposals out there. A very good place to look, for instance, is there's this thing called the Real Facebook Oversight Board. So there's self-regulation that's happened in the big companies. Facebook on its own comes and says, we're going to create a Facebook oversight committee. And then people come together and say, no, the oversight committee has enough problems. We are going to create the real Facebook oversight board. And just learning from what's happening there and saying, what can we do in Uganda? I think it would be great to have private sector coming together to say, do we have a real oversight such that when unwanted witness releases a report, I don't wait until I hear of it either at a function or, because the question then becomes, okay, they've done the heavy lifting. Who takes it to the next mile? You see, who takes it to the next mile? Where are the resources flowing? And how do we build those synergies towards creating real oversight that is socially conscious for those of us who are collecting the data, for those of us whose data is being collected, to say, for instance, if you start a campaign, yes to compliance, can I start another one to say, did you comply? Such that when these things eventually, when these pieces eventually come together, you have faster momentum. And Alan raises an excellent point, the question on resources. I have always argued that Uganda's problem, and I know I'm almost veering into controversial territory here, but Uganda's problem isn't money. It's priorities. The money may not be the biggest problem. So maybe we need to rethink our priorities, especially if we start to think, you know, we have oil in this country, but we have more minerals in terms of net worth, more minerals than oil. And in the middle of my doctoral studies on natural resource taxation, I realized that, hang on a second, the most valuable natural resource on earth is not oil, it's not minerals, it's not water, it's people. Because you know what? Maybe the earth is getting wasted away. God won't produce more gold or more minerals. But this industry that produces babies in the multiples every minute, that is, you can't beat that. That's the world's biggest natural resource. And if the next frontier on which this industry is going to be controlled is data, I think that it is a good strategy to invest resources there to protect that generation, because if we don't, that generation will become a problem. I always like to use the example of security guards. If you look at private security companies in Uganda, they don't pay too well. One time, I got to my office at about 6 p.m. and I promise this is the last story. You know, I come from the tribe where God gave us a gift. We tell stories better than any tribe in the universe, even the metaverse. You know, but I promise it's the last story and I will keep it really brief. So I drive to my office about 5:30 or 6 p.m. I was in a hurry, I don't remember for what. And I hoot, and the guard doesn't come. And I hoot again. In hindsight, it looks really foolish. I could have just got out of the car, opened the gate, and gone in. This guard comes out, but he's the most pleasant guard we've had. I've been at the location for 9 years. Still, he's the most pleasant guy ever. So I asked him Saturday, his name was Saturday, what happened? He said, he looked down and said, boss, forgive me. I said, no, something is wrong. What is the problem? He said, I didn't sleep last night. I've been on my feet the whole day. I had just put my head down. I dozed off. Please forgive me. I said, hang on a second. How many hours do you sleep? He says, I work night at a different site. I work here during the day. Out of pure curiosity, I asked him, how much are you paid? He said, I'm paid 100,000 a month. I said, okay, how many kids do you have? He said, I have 2 kids in the village. They've got to go to school. Now, for most of us here, we thank the Lord for blessing us, that the amount of money he was earning a month is probably what you will spend on lunch before you leave. That guy has a firearm. And I have noticed at my office that the ones in the night have, what do you call them? Rapid something assault rifles, really complex guns. But I always ask my friends, if there was a security problem in this country, who do you think that guy will shoot first? Your neighbor? Or the person who's always hooting loudest and shouting at him? And if we don't safeguard the kids who are 4, 5, 6 years old now and know how to use the most sophisticated phones the world has made, from the risks of data, number one. Number two, if we don't harness the promise of the fourth industrial revolution in a responsible way to give them a competing edge, because they will compete in that world, we must teach them. When I went to law school, I was really proud because my parents said you must do a professional course. Fun fact, I was actually admitted for MDD on government. My father said, forget it. Bobby Wine would have been my classmate. You know, one wonders where that path would have led. But there was this thing about professional courses. The more I stay in the low and emerging tech space, I wonder if I want my son to be a lawyer, if I want him to be a data scientist. Creating those promises of tomorrow, harnessing them, that's where government needs to go. And therefore, making sure that they are safe, but that they also realize the benefits. Investing resources in those two almost competing tensions, for me, will be the biggest blessing we'll have done. Whether it's at planning level, the other day I was thinking about merging biosciences. What has COVID taught us with data? We can plan better. We can use our medicines better. We can accelerate development. We can solve problems locally. COVID has proved that. And if we do that, we will have a better, richer, healthier, and safer country. And I'd like to suggest that perhaps we start there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. For me, that I was trying to imagine Robert, the musician, if he had taken that route. But thank you so much, given the short time we have. Thank you so much, Robert, for accepting the invitation to come today and honor us with your presence. We've learned a lot. Thank you so much, Alan. Thank you for the work you continue to drive. Thank you so much, Lillian, for your time. And also to thank the Personal Data Protection Office, PASS Lab, Kampala, NITA, Ministry of ICT, and the organizers for today. From the panel here, we are thankful for the opportunity, and we wish everyone a fruitful day as we continue to shine the light on personal data, given today is the International Data Privacy Day, and let's do this continuously. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
A very big thank you to our panelists. Thank you so much for enlightening us and giving us the many stories and the many examples that you have shown us. So I hope now we have more than enough reasons to actually care about privacy as individuals and also be able to enforce our rights when those privacy rights are violated. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for staying with us to this hour. We have quite a number of just 2 more items and then we'll call it a wrap for the day. So allow me introduce the next panel, which is harnessing value from data while protecting your rights. Our next speaker is Mr. Martin Gordon Mubanjizi, who is a data scientist and officer in charge of UN Global Pulse Kampala. UN Global Pulse is the UN Secretary General's initiative on big data and AI for development, humanitarian action, and peace. UNGP's vision is a world in which responsible and inclusive digital innovation serves to empower people and protect the planet. Now, before joining Pulse Lab Kampala, Martin has been in academia and worked in universities in Uganda for close to 10 years. Martin is passionate about privacy-preserving solutions to data sharing for reuse for social good. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome with me, Martin, to take us through our next panel of the day. Martin, you're very welcome. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm excited to be here. I would like to recognize the UN resident coordinator, who happens to be my boss. The ED NITA, the Director, Personal Data Protection Office, and I would also want to thank the panel before me, Robert, Lillian, Alan and Emmanuel. You've done the subject justice, and I think I'll just add to that. As you've heard, my name is Martin Gordon Mubanjizi, a data scientist, but also the officer in charge of Pulse Lab Kampala. So UN Global Pulse has 4 labs, and we are lucky that one of the labs is here in Kampala, but the other labs are in New York, Finland, and then Indonesia. And as I said, in Uganda, we are under the leadership of the UN Resident Coordinator, and I'm very excited that she's here with us. So for long, next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, it's okay. Okay, so I think there are problems with the slides. So for a long time, oil was regarded as the most valuable resource. But as you've heard in the previous panel, in the new digital age, you hear statements like data is the new oil. So we know that with oil, there is need to extract the energy, but in data we extract knowledge and insights. But if we try to compare the two, oil and data, you find that oil is created by a natural phenomenon, while data is a resource that we all contribute to. So as you use your ATM, as you've heard, as you order for a boda taxi, you are generating data. As you're using social media, as you're using mobile money, you are leaving a footprint. So you're contributing to data knowingly or unknowingly. Now, both oil and data need to be extracted. So for data, you would need analytics, you would need visualizations, you need modeling to be able to extract value out of data. But the difference is that the energy from oil can be depleted, but the value from data or knowledge and insights from data can never be depleted, and therefore you could actually have data reused for different purposes, and you will not deplete the value in the data. But we know that most data, next slide, we know that most data basically has personal identifying information and sometimes very sensitive information, so there are different harms. And as you've heard from the previous panel, these harms do exist, and there is need to protect this data such that the privacy of individuals behind the data is actually protected from these kinds of harms. But also, next slide. But also we know that there are various benefits or values that can be extracted from this data. You can have ICT statistics, for example, generated from telecoms data, and ITU has actually implemented some projects in some countries to extract, to generate ICT indicators. But you can also have like social indicators, you can also have economic indicators, you can also support tourism. You can also generate tourism statistics from actually these, data that we all contribute to. You could also use it to respond to, to a pandemic like COVID. We know that most countries in the world used telecom data to understand how people were moving within the country, between districts, between regions, after implementations of lockdowns, just to understand whether the measures that are put in place are actually working, and that could also help them change something in their models, their prediction models, to understand how the numbers of COVID cases would actually increase. But also, when it comes to a city like Kampala, Kampala would be interested in knowing the day and night population, for planning purposes. I'll be talking about a case where we try to use border data to try to understand the traffic congestion, but also the road conditions in Kampala. So all these are things that can be possible with this kind of data. But of course, we should do this while preserving privacy. So your privacy matters. The next slide. So, United Nations has UN principles on personal data and data protection and privacy. And from these, we, as UN Global Pulse, we derived our principles. That we use when we are working on data projects. But these UN principles were adopted by the High-Level Committee on Management in 2018 for the UN system. And whenever we are collecting or using or sharing data, personal data or any other sensitive non-personal information, we basically use these principles. So these are the principles. One is fair. Next slide. One is, the first principle is fair and legitimate processing. So we process data in a fair manner in accordance with the United Nations global mandate. And this is always to advance specific SDGs. The other one is purpose specification, so the purpose must be very clear. The other one is proportionality and necessity, and here we ensure that the data we process is relevant, limited, and adequate to what is necessary in relation to the specific purpose of data processing. We also have a no re-identification principle. We don't attempt to knowingly or purposefully re-identify the identified data. So one way of preserving privacy is you de-identify data by maybe hashing the personal information. And so if we receive such data, we don't attempt to re-identify it. The other one is retention. We only retain data for a time that is necessary for the specific purposes. Because when you keep data longer, then you also risk, you also risk violating, someone violating privacy. We have accuracy, we have confidentiality, we process data with due regard to confidentiality. We also have the principle of security. We implement appropriate organizational, administrative, physical, technical safeguards and procedures to protect the security of the data, including against or from any unauthorized or accidental access, damage, loss, or other risks presented by data processing. And then we also have data sensitivity. We also have risks, harms, and benefits assessment that we also carry out to understand what risks might be there and how to actually mitigate those risks. Then we have transparency. We also look at technology collaboration and data transfers, because sometimes we do have collaborators that we work with, and then we also have accountability. So those are the principles that are derived from the UN Personal Data Protection Principles that we use at UN Global Pact. Normally when I flash this slide, I normally get lots of worries in people. But basically this is just a sample slide that that was part of a manual that UN Global Pact produced some years back to explain basically how useful telecoms data could be. And what you see up there is a call details record, and it just shows basically the fields that a telecoms a call detail record has. But it's not that we receive such information. As I'm going to explain, I'm going to present two examples where we have accessed data and used it, and one case is where we accessed telecoms data, and I'll also be explaining how we actually used that. Yeah, so in a call detail record, you have a caller ID, the person who is calling, and you can see in that sample slide is which was just generated for the report. The caller ID is hashed. Then you have the location of the tower of the person calling. You have the person being called, and it's also hashed. Then you have the location of the person who is receiving the call, and then you have the call duration, and also you have the call time. And so this kind of data could be useful to understand mobility. Like I've said, during this COVID season, many countries have actually used telecoms data to understand how people are moving. But you can also understand social interaction, but you can also understand economic activity, because we know that these days people transact on phones. So, and these records are basically at the telecoms. But of course, if you wanted to do this, you would aggregate data, at maybe district level. So in Uganda, we have, I think, around 146 districts. Maybe you would want to understand how is money moving from between districts. So it's basically you're not looking at individuals, but you can look at aggregate data. But also that aggregate data will have lots of insights that it will give an individual. So in this slide, we back in I think 2014, were able to access some data from so it is data for 2013, but we accessed it in 2014 from a telecom in Uganda, and what we received were aggregate numbers, and these were just mobility matrix, which was just the percentage of people moving from one tower to another. So in that way, even if one was to receive the data, one could not re-identify individuals behind the data, because this is at population level. But you have an interesting visualization that shows how people move within Uganda throughout the calendar year. Okay. Next slide. And this kind of information could actually be useful in response to diseases like Ebola or typhoid. We tried using it for typhoid in 2015, but I would not say we are unfortunate, but the Ministry of Health managed to bring down the outbreak quickly before we actually evaluated whether this would be very useful in a response like that. But you can see this is all something that is possible if, for example, there are mechanisms that preserve privacy that are available to aid in accessing such data and to do analysis to inform government. Next slide. Now maybe then then this is another example. This is another example where we accessed some data, and in this case it was from a startup company. They gave us some sample data to understand how the data they basically record, and we using that data we wrote code, and after writing code we gave them the code, and then they were able to generate the visualization. But these are now this shows boda bodas moving around Kampala, where you see, so each light that is dashing is a boda boda, but where it is light, the boda boda, it is at a very high speed. Where it is dark, it has reduced speed, and you'll see that where it has high speed it is longer, and where it is darker it is short. And you can see that along the northern bypass you'll see the boda bodas appear to be longer. I mean, like the lines are longer and they are white in color because the northern bypass allows them to move at a very high speed, you know. So using this information, one can be able to work out traffic congestion, but also the road conditions. And that can be presented in the next slide. That can be presented in the next slide on a map, you know. So KCCA could maybe, you know, kind of find this information useful. We can color code the roads according to the road conditions, but also the congestion. And this would allow you to zoom in basically to check out to be able to see what is happening at each road section. We were able to, this data was generated from 100 boda bodas. The startup company was providing a service to the boda bodas for anti-theft, so such that in case the boda boda is stolen, they're able to track where it is. So basically, these are the examples I wanted to present here, and yeah, and I think that's all in the interest of time. Yeah, thanks very much. And I would say we are very excited as UN Global Pulse, but also as Pulse Lab Kampala, that the Personal Data Protection Office has, been established, and we are looking forward to working with you to unlock the value from data. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin, for that wonderful presentation. I am very lucky, that when something happens, my colleague Angela is handling something small. So now I have a good opportunity to invite my boss, Dr. Hatwib Mugasa, to give the closing remarks.
Thank you, Angela and Angela Tugume, for moderating this session on data protection and privacy. As we come to the end of the session, my task I thought would be easy, but it has become challenging because of the previous panelists. The first panelist scared me. I began looking at my applications, which ones to uninstall, which ones maybe I need another phone. But the UN Global App panelist has given us the reason why we need data, the benefits of data, and the future of data, what data can do for us. So my task is challenging. I don't know. I have to balance the equation. Do we pull back on the applications? Do we promote the applications? And I say that data is, just as the presenter said, it's the most valuable product or valuable resource in the world, more than energy, more than human resources. I beg to differ with the council. Yes, data is information. With information, you have the power, you have the knowledge to make decisions, business decisions, political decisions. And we have seen how data has been used in changing opinions, sentiments, as the previous panel said, the sentiments in the elections, in the US elections. So yes, we need to harness this power as a country. So with the National Ministry of ICT and National Guidance, the UN Resident Coordinator, the National Data Protection Director, the participants, both physical and online, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us as NITA and the National Data Protection Office in celebrating this day, the first of its kind in Uganda, the Data Protection Day 2022. One of the achievements that the office has done is to, first it was, the office was operationalized in 2021, in July, I believe July 2021. It's a second office in East Africa. There are only 16 offices or commissions, data protection commissions in Africa. That's a very great achievement. And that day we operationalized this office, I got a call from one lawyer, lawyer Kayondo, I believe. He told me the day that the office was operationalized, he got a couple of calls from partners very interested in the policy, in the regulations and the law, data protection law, and the value of contracts doubled in just one single day because of the operationalization of this office. So that's a very great achievement for Uganda, and we expect even more investment because of the operationalization of the Data Protection Office. The National Information Technology Authority Act of 2009 mandated NITA to promote and protect the privacy of data in Uganda. However, in 2019, Parliament enacted the Data Protection and Privacy Act and mandated an office to be instituted within NITA. And that's why we have the National Data Protection Office within NITA Uganda. This office has a very big role. I tell people this is, as you see, the Chief Justice in the daily operations. In data, this is the highest office in matters pertaining to data or determining the regulatory environment in the digital field. So it's a very big office, and it has a very big task to undertake. At NITA, we are designing solutions. We're designing e-government solutions for government of Uganda, but we also have to put in mind the privacy of these solutions. So we follow by example. We are preaching the word, but also we have to be compliant to the law. We call upon the government, MDAs, and private sectors also to comply to the law. This will promote the digitization of our country, or the promotion of the services, the digital services. So I would like to end my my comments by saying that the office is one of the channels for promoting digitization of the e-government services in Uganda and enabling the transformation of our economy through digital services. So I encourage all partners to embrace this law, to get appraised with the regulations, and also to be compliant by registering with the National Data Protection Office. With those remarks, I would like to thank you all for attending this, this day, the Data Privacy Day, and I would like to also thank the UN, the partnership with the UN Resident Coordinator and the UN Global Pulse Lab, and all stakeholders who have made this day a success. Thank you very much, and for God and my country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hatwib. We are very honored and privileged to have you give us the closing remarks on this day, the Data Privacy Day, Friday, 28th January 2022. Now, allow me to say thank you to all our guests today, to our keynote speaker. Thank you so much, UN Resident Commissioner, for being with us and for giving us that brilliant keynote. We are greatly honored and appreciate. And also allow me to say thank you to the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance for partnering with us. And also allow me to say thank you to UN Global Pulse for being our partners and sponsors for this event. We do say a very great thank you to you. And of course to our very good panelists that gave us a very insightful presentation or panel discussion on why privacy should matter to you as an individual. Robert, Lillian, and Alan, thank you so much. We greatly appreciate. And of course to Emmanuel as our moderator. Our invited guests that are in this room, thank you so much for joining us. And also to our online audience, thank you so much for joining us online and for keeping the conversation going wherever it has been. And so as we conclude, I'd just like to invite the National Director back to the stand to give us a farewell, if you may, in just a minute.
Thank you very much. I think really all has been said. The ED-NITA has spoken. Our keynote speaker, the UN Resident Coordinator, has spoken. I've spoken. The panelists have spoken. I hope we've picked a lot of lessons. Many of our participants in the room are data protection officers or people we know are privacy champions in their organizations. Now you know that it goes beyond the organization. It goes into your families, it goes into your church. So please spread the word and let's continue this conversation going. Thank you very much. Angela will announce the housekeeping issues, but if I may, can I invite the panelists, the UN Resident Coordinator, ED Regina, the ED Unwanted Witness, for a picture. We need to commemorate the first celebration of Data Privacy Day in Uganda. And of course, the staff of the office who are here. Thank you. I'm so used to the mask. Sometimes I forget to take it off.
Okay, thank you so much, Stella. And ladies and gentlemen, have a very good afternoon today and enjoy your weekend. God bless you. Remember that your privacy matters and let's ensure that it's safeguarded. Have a good day. Bye-bye. For the guests in the room, lunch